to hand you over, first of all, to Tim Wood, the Director for Northern Powerhouse Rail at Transport for the North. We'll also be hearing from Andy, Steve and Lorna. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Tim Wood. I'm the Northern Powerhouse Rail Director, and I'm absolutely delighted the amount of people that are in the room today and the amount of people that have actually attended. So I always used to say I've got the second most difficult job. David Davis had the first one to organise Brexit, and I have to work with and keep together in one voice all the leaders of the North. 57 of them, including the LEPs, the Metro Mayors, the leaders of the Transport Authority. And you know, that's exactly what we did last Thursday. So I am going to break with protocol, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the speech that I gave to them before they made their decision on the strategic outline business case. You have the power to make a big decision today. This could be a landmark day for the North. Just under 200 years ago, the North made history with the launch of the first world intercity passenger rail service between the great cities of Liverpool and Manchester in 1830. By the time we reach that bicentenary in 2030, with your support, we'll be underway with another intercity railway, Northern Powerhouse Rail, and will again be making history. This is our flagship programme at the centre of our strategic transport plan, and will be a key driver in helping us support the rebalance of the UK economy. In fact, this will be the North's biggest single transport intervention since the Industrial Revolution, when it all began. That's the scale of the decision today that we're talking about now. Northern Powerhouse Rail will link together our major economic centres. It will be a life changer for more than 15 million people. All of us in this room are part of this. We have worked together on a transformative plan to give people the opportunity to change the way they travel, live and work, to fuel our towns and cities with the talent they need, to widen the accessible pool of talent available to employers. This is not about a railway. This is about an economic future of the north of England. It's about the future of the population, a population that has been constrained for far too long, which now needs to operate to its full potential. 5 times more people today will have access to 4 or more of our major cities within 90 minutes and our major international airport. That's 10 million people. So today, 2 million people, 4 to 6 of the major cities in 90 minutes, 10 million people after Northern Powerhouse Rail is built. And those 10 million people will be serviced with fast and frequent trains, far greater capacity to move them in comfort, and the technologies to support their needs, smart ticketing, Wi-Fi, information systems, and full integration with other transport systems, all helping remove the barriers to movement and encourage a shift to rail as a transport of choice. It's a game changer, especially when you consider more than 250,000 businesses will also benefit. What would it mean to jobs and the economy if we progress the scheme? Our evidence shows that Northern Powerhouse Rail could grow the economy in the north by an additional 3.4 billion per year by 2060 and create an additional 35,000 new jobs in our city centres. And that's just the start. Today we have the opportunity to move a step closer to locking in commitment to making Powerhouse Rail a reality without locking out the options for its future development. I want to thank you for the time taken over the winter to scrutinise our shared plans. A scale of this ambition needs that scrutiny, and I welcome it. As you know, we've taken fully on board your feedback and adjusted the plan to reflect it. It gave us all time to consider in detail further strengthening the transformative case. We are now, subject to your approval today, ready to submit it to the government. It represents 2 years of evidence built collaboratively with officers from around the north, as well as Department for Transport, Network Rail and High Speed 2 Limited. It turns ambition and passion into a robust and clear evidence-based case for transformative change. It demonstrates viable options and solutions for rail connectivity across the north. It will release capacity across our networks. It will open up new opportunities for growth of freight on rail. And it creates the interconnected north which TfN was established to achieve. Sheffield to Leeds, 28 minutes instead of 43, with 4 fast trains an hour instead of the one currently. Leeds to Manchester, 25 minutes instead of 46, with 6 trains an hour. That's one every 10 minutes. Today, 820 seats an hour between Manchester and Leeds. When these programmes are finished, 12,500 seats per hour. That's a turn up and go system, and that is real capacity and real speed. A third off the journey time between Hull and Liverpool. A doubling of speeds on key routes across the north. It all adds up to a transformed north of England, where the cogs of the economy, fully oiled and working to drive growth and prosperity. Let's be clear. Northern Powerhouse Rail shows a very clear economic benefit for both the North and the UK. It's a £39 billion ambitious but achievable vision to develop a transformative rail network linked seamlessly with our national and regional existing and proposed networks. Fast links to Liverpool through NPR and High Speed 2. 2 million more people able to access Liverpool city centre within 90 minutes. 500,000 people able to access Newcastle in the same time. And over 1 million more people able to access Hull. We're talking about transformation of stations across the north. Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Bradford and Warrington, to name but a few. It's a cumulative effect, which is why we have to consider network as a single entity. In terms of value, the whole really is, in this case, greater than the sum of the parts. Thriving cities such as Bradford, powered by fast mainline rail. Crossroad economic hubs such as Warrington, with a centrally placed key foundation stone on which to build a new city. It's within our gift to leave this legacy for those that follow us. If we can show the same sort of courage and determination as shown by those who started the first industrial revolution all those years ago. That's why today matters. For me, and I suspect for you. All of us in this room. So what now? Your board approval is critical. It will send a clear signal to government that the North is speaking with one voice. It enables Transport for North High Speed 2 and the government to proceed at pace on the next phases of work. In submitting the Northern Powerhouse Rail Strategic Outline Business Case to government, the statutory advice that supports it gives us a clear opportunity to publicly say to government, this is what the North wants and inspects. We want full government commitment to Northern Powerhouse Rail. We want a clear path to consultation and parliamentary approval by the mid-2020s. We want more control of related development schemes, High Speed 2 Limited, Phase 2B, and TransPen and Upgrade. And we call for strengthened co-client role in these other programmes. And we want a recognition of the critical role that Northern Powerhouse Rail has in regeneration and growth, and the need to invest in policy levers to maximise the benefits of each. The Strategic Outline Business Case is an important step. But really, it's just a starting point for the next phase of work. As a region, we need to move seamlessly to enjoy the benefits and ensure that they happen for Northern Powerhouse Rail so it can be delivered as quickly as possible. We want by 2020 to have an agreed preferred network and be ready to consult with the public. That's a huge undertaking and one we will all need to deliver together. The immediate priority is to confirm the High Speed 2 touchpoints as quickly as we can, and then really focus on the key decisions that will lead to our preferred single network. But the key to taking this forward today, once done, is the fact we've lodged our case. We're in the mix. We will be on the agenda, and we will together be able to build on that. It's over to you. This is your moment. We call on leaders of the North to approve the Strategic Outline Business Case. And the key thing out of that was, it got approved. It got approved unanimously. So this programme of work is not about the railways. It's about rebalancing the UK economy. It's about big business coming up from London because they know that the workers can move around a lot quicker. So you're born in Sheffield, you go to university in Hull, and you can live in Liverpool, and you can easily do that. It's not even about speed. It's about capacity, moving large amounts of people across the north. Is it affordable? Oh, you're damn right it's affordable. So at the moment, 1 to 1.2% of GDP, the government says, will be spent on transport. If you add all the transport of the North programmes together, that's 0.7%. That's really important. That means that our programme, in effect, every single Northerner gets £100 per person per year for transport. We're calling for an extra £50 a person. I'm prepared to put my £50 in every year for the next 30 years to get this network built. Because we're leaving a legacy. We're leaving a legacy for the 6 and 7-year-olds that are in school today. So that's where we are. We move forward. We're absolutely determined to deliver it. We will deliver it. Thank you.
Okay, so if I'd like to introduce you to the stage, please. So we have Steve Rotheram now. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Thanks for that fantastic welcome. What an introduction that was. I'm Steve Rotheram, the Metro Mayor of Liverpool City Region. Thanks for the kind invite to visit Sheffield today. And I want to talk about how NPR will act as an opportunity to bring our towns and cities closer together, and also to act as a catalyst for wider economic regeneration. Now, you'll be pleased to know that I've been given 20 minutes and I won't be taking up that full 20 minutes. It may feel like I've taken up the 20 minutes, but I should do it in about 12. The starting point of all this, I suppose, has to be why Northern Powerhouse Rail? There are a whole host of answers to that particular question, but I'll concentrate on two solid cases, a political one and an economic one. The UK is the most politically centralised democracy in the OECD, and we have the most geographically unbalanced economy in Europe. Now, some believe those two factors to be mutually exclusive, but I'd strongly believe myself that they are intrinsically linked. We have a model of governance that has for far too long looked south over many decades, which has led to 16 million people who call the North home facing poorer outcomes when it comes to health, education, skills, housing, and of course transport. To address this disengagement with the centre, we need an urgent rebalancing of the economy south to north. Indeed, I'd hypothesise that the significant Leave vote registered in many northern working class communities can largely be traced to a disconnect with our own political system. I therefore believe the seeds of Brexit were as equally sown in Whitehall and Westminster as they were in Strasbourg and Brussels. So there needs to be a tangible demonstration of intent that the government is listening, and principally that begins with Northern Powerhouse Rail, or Crossrail for the North, as I'll occasionally call it. In my area, the Liverpool City region, the benefits of west-east connectivity are clear and unambiguous. NPR would increase our GVA by an estimated £15 billion, improve our visitor numbers by 6.3 million, and result in 24,000 jobs in our area alone. Crucially, NPR opens up huge opportunities to a new generation of workers because journey times would be cut so dramatically. Gone would be the days of people turning down job offers because of the thought of an hour's train commute, which should take half that time, being simply too unpalatable. NPR would cut the travel time from Liverpool to Manchester to just 22 minutes, meaning that you could, if you choose, work in Manchester and live somewhere with culture. In fact, on my way up here today on the train, I started to think about how NPR might benefit me. So, if I can just for a moment, let me take you on a journey into the future. Let's imagine the year is 2030 odd. Northern Powerhouse Rail is up and running, on time and to budget. Now, for many, you'll have to push the boundaries of imagination on that one. The great cities of Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield, Newcastle and Hull are properly connected, and thriving once again. The people who live there speak with many accents, but have one voice and are all pulling in the same direction. The North is finally getting its act together as a counterbalance to the still overheating London and the South East. But all is not well for a now rapidly ageing middle-aged Steve Rotheram. The Tory Prime Minister, by the name of Rees-Mogg, has decided to take advantage of improved health outcomes made possible by new technologies of the fourth industrial revolution and has raised the retirement age to 80. Counting the years to full retirement, I'm still touring the country espousing the case for yet more devolution, arguing that it's the only way in which UK PLC can benefit as a whole. There is, however, one saving grace. Travelling is no longer a burden or an impediment to FDI and inward investment. I can leave my house in Aintree, just behind the Grand National Racecourse, and make the 10-minute walk to my local station. Now, it only takes me 5 minutes at the moment, but I've built into that decrepitude of... Once there, I can get on the publicly owned transport system in Merseyrail and be in Liverpool city centre within minutes. Once in Liverpool, I can head to Lime Street and be in London in 85 minutes, Leeds in 52 minutes, or dare I say it, Manchester in 22 minutes. Northern Powerhouse Rail will bring towns and cities closer than they've ever been before. It's not and never has been a vehicle only to improve the lot of our cities, though. And that's the message that we have to communicate all of the time. If we don't, and if TfN just becomes about big cities, we'll quickly lose the faith of many people who call the town their home. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by all this. There's a small town in my city region who will benefit demonstrably from Northern Powerhouse Rail. Maghull is a small area in Sefton that's home to approximately 25,000 people, but with major housing projects currently underway, it's growing all the time. In recognition of this, last year the combined authority that I lead opened up a brand new £13 million station in Maghull North, the first new one on the Merseyrail network for 20 years. This means that the people who live there are currently benefiting from a brand new station with direct trains to Liverpool every 15 minutes, 98% of which are on time. Eat your heart out, Northern and Transpennine Express. And next year, the station will be serviced by our brand new £460 million rolling stock, the most sophisticated and accessible trains in the country. But it's when NPR comes into existence that the game really starts to change. With our current rail system across the north, many people living in towns like Maghull, which is sandwiched between two motorways, feel it's simpler to jump in the car if they need to head to Manchester or Newcastle or Leeds. And who can blame them? After the summer of chaos on our railways, there's a real lack of faith in our trains as a reliable, quick and easy form of transport. However, by getting Northern Powerhouse Rail right and by bringing people with us, we have the opportunity to change behaviour. Not only does NPR stand to improve journey times, but it could also reduce congestion, encourage modal shift, improve air quality, support health and well-being, and create agglomeration. But it could also remove 150 million miles from HGVs off our motorways by transferring freight onto rail. And I was at the TfN meeting the other day when Pete Waterman was explaining the complexities of actually doing this. But we all agree that it needs commitment from government to facilitate it. It's a strange fact, isn't it, that when the biomass comes into the port of Liverpool for the Drax site in Selby, it takes between 7 and 9 hours to get it there. And actually, someone's calculated that it's quicker to cycle between Liverpool and Drax than take the goods by rail. I think you had to be Chris Boardman to do it in that time, by the way, because it'd take me a lot longer. But when we talk about the need for Northern Powerhouse Rail, we do so from a starting position of basic fairness. And I used the term Crossrail for the North earlier, and I know this winds a few people up as they want to embed Northern Powerhouse Rail, and quite rightly so, in the lexicon of the body politic, both north and south. But I refer to it as Crossrail for the North because London already has a Crossrail, the spiral costs of which are seemingly being financed from the same magic money tree that the Prime Minister found for the DUP. And they have ambitions for another in London. Now, I've spoken to my very good friend Sadiq Khan, and I don't blame him for doing this. And I do agree that there shouldn't be competition between us. But all I'm saying, and I've said this to his face, if there are two checks, one for Crossrail 2 and one for NPR, that's fine. But if there's only one, it has to come here in the north first. Simply, there needs to be a Crossrail for the north before there's a second Crossrail for the south. And despite a Treasury funding methodology that will always favour southern infrastructure projects over ourselves, our case is overwhelming. A £100 billion boost to the North's economy, as Tim said, by 2050, plus an additional 850,000 jobs. And NPR would increase the population within 60 minutes of 4 major cities from 10,000 to 1.3 million. The coming weeks and months are crucial as the plan is put to government. Any indication that the government is set to ignore this weight of evidence will confirm what many of us in this room have suspected for a long time, that national government is committed to rebalancing the economy in name only. Anything other than full-blooded support for NPR from the government will say to me that they've given up. They've given up on northern commuters, they've given up on northern jobs and northern businesses, and ultimately given up on our northern towns and cities. It's for us all here in this room and for the 16 million people that we serve to ensure that no government ignores such a powerful constituent body. And today marks another powerful step towards achieving what we're all here to achieve. Thanks a lot.
So, first of all, apologies, Mayor Steve Rotheram, for the most underwhelming introduction to stage you will ever receive. At least you'll remember me by my mediocrity. So, next up then, please may I welcome Lorna Pimlott, Director of Sponsorship and Policy of HS2 Limited. Thank you.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, TfN, for inviting me here today to share a very important moment in progress for TfN and Northern Powerhouse as well. HS2 have been working very closely, in fact, arm in glove with NPR and TfN for some time now, and that's because clearly we are working for the same strategic purpose, which is yes, ensuring that we rebalance the economy from south to north, which we've heard from most of our speakers today to date, but also to make sure we improve the well-being and the prosperity of our people in the north. Make no mistake, the purpose of both the programmes for NPR and HS2 is not transport. It's definitely the economic benefits that these projects can bring to the north. So we are working absolutely hand in glove with them to make sure we get it right. To make sure that when we are looking at the north and the south connectivity, we work closely with Midland Connect and how we're actually linking from the Midlands to the southeast and to London. But for the east-west connectivity, that we as HS2 fully support TfN and NPR and their strategy to make sure that those journey times and the connectivity across the country are also improved to the best that we can. We haven't forgotten Scotland either, as we're working very closely with the Scottish Government and Transport for Scotland to make sure that network we can actually utilise the journey time improvements across the country as well. We're very aware that there's really 4 economic hubs that we are connecting for HS2. London and South East, Northern Powerhouse, the Midland Engine, and indeed Scotland. And working in this integrated way, we will bring the most connectivity and improve capacity. Capacity, as you've heard both from Tim and from Steve, not just for passenger, but also for very needed freight services as well. And for that reason, we continue to work very closely with what we can do across the network, not just on our HS2 network. As there's no doubt that the HS2 network, as of 2033, will become the backbone of the rail network across the UK. But it's been said earlier by Andrew Jones, we cannot do this alone. We will only achieve the benefits if we deliver it in an integrated manner and make sure we have maximised the opportunity on the classic network in parallel with what we're doing on the HS2 network. We need to make sure that the opportunities for jobs and business growth are maximised. And HS2 personally has committed significantly to do this, with even working with the supply chain, having already awarded 6 billion of contracts to date, and that's likely to move to 20 billion in the next 18 months. So the opportunity we are bringing in the country is absolutely now, and absolutely ensuring that our SMEs and our local businesses get as much access to those contracts as possible. We need to make sure that throughout our development, we work with our towns and cities and make sure that the benefits are not just to the cities that have our line and service passing through. So working closely with Preston and Wigan and Doncaster and Huddersfield, just as our partners, TfN, are doing, is absolutely key to us. We need to make sure that HS2 really is the building blocks for the ambition for NPR. They are not mutually exclusive, as you've heard before today. They absolutely work hand in hand. Neither will succeed without the other. HS2 at the moment is progressing with phase 1 that received its royal assent in 2017. We are working hard to make sure that we can deliver value for money in phase 1. We've just awarded our Euston and Old Oak Common delivery partners for our stations, and we continue to progress with our enabling works, which are very visible both at Euston and Curzon Street. This momentum is coming. HS2 is already happening. And my ask of you in the north is actually to believe it and to actually share with your organisations and your constituents that this really is happening, and it's happening now. It's not something that's in the future that may or may not happen. That said, we have 2A currently in Parliament, and in fact it deposited its additional provisions last Friday, which is very positive. We are on time to get our royal assent for 2A at the end of this year, and we are hoping that, similar to its second reading in Parliament last January, that will be all-party support. All-party. Regardless of our political climate, it is essential that we commit to both the NPR and the HS2 schemes to deliver these economic opportunities. Phase 2 is working to their hybrid bill development for June 20, and we've just completed our working draft environmental statement, which I'm very pleased to say got 34,000 responses. So I'm not sure what you're all doing over Christmas, but some of you were writing to us, and I'm very, very grateful for that, because it's a very key part of that parliamentary process that we listen to what the public are concerned about with regards to our delivery. So I would just like to conclude to say HS2 and NPR, hand in hand, are joining up Britain. They're joining up Britain to create jobs, to create wealth and opportunity for our businesses. It's not an either-or, and most importantly, what both will do is they will ensure that the people in the north get the services they deserve, as well as the ones they desperately need. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So now to introduce Andy Koss, the Chief Executive of Drax Power Station. Thank you.
So I think it's good afternoon now. So good afternoon, everybody. So I'm just going to give you some reflections as head of Drax Power Limited, as one of the very big users of freight across the Northern Powerhouse Rail network. And also, I'm a board member of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, so I also want to cover passenger as well, because I do think the two can sit very, very closely alongside each other. So at Drax Power Station, we're the biggest power station in Western Europe. We've converted 4 of our 6 generators now to run on biomass pellets, as Steve alluded to, and we now move 7 million tonnes of pellets every year across the rail network. So we've invested around £700 million in our power plants, but also indirectly another £250 million in the ports. And so we bring in our pellets through Liverpool, through Newcastle, through Immingham, and through Hull. And it's absolutely critical that the rail network and those ports work very well for us in order to keep our business running. Historically, we ran on coal. We could keep around 10 weeks of supply on stock at the power station. Now we have our biomass stored in domes. We have 10 days. So it's very much a just-in-time supply chain. And therefore, the connectivity ports into our power station are absolutely critical. Now, as Steve mentioned, to come 77 miles from Liverpool to Selby, it did used to take 12 hours. It's now about 7 to 9. Immingham, which is about 35 miles from Drax, can be up to 4 hours. So what we need is much greater connectivity and much more speed on the network. Not only does it mean freight trains can get out the way of passenger trains, it also means we have a more resilient supply chain. And we're supporting around 6,000 jobs in the north and putting in around £600 million of additional GVA. So we're a big part of the north and a big supporter of jobs in the area. So what about the future? We want to continue delivering our power on biomass through Drax. Actually, just last week we announced we want to be the first carbon negative plant. So we can actually capture and store the carbon that is being emitted at the power station. But in order to do that and in order to get government support, we need to have better rail connectivity and we need to bring the cost of rail down. At the moment, we're bringing in around 17 trains a day. We're keeping 270,000 trucks off the road. So not only is it a cost perspective, but there's also a decarbonisation perspective and an air quality perspective as well. But what we want to do is bring down those journey times. So, for example, it was really good to see in the video from Chris Grayling that he's a big supporter of the Skipton Colne link. Now, this will help improve connectivity between Liverpool and Drax, taking it down from that 7 to 9 hours to just 3 hours. And not only does it make our pellets arrive at the power plant quicker, it also makes greater connectivity for Skipton Building Society into East Lancashire, and it also frees up the Transpennine corridor to ensure that there are more trains that can move between Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds. If I can also comment on, I suppose, my perspective from a Northern Powerhouse board member, I think we've all heard about the 850,000 jobs, the additional GVA that can be added by the agglomeration of bringing these cities together. We need young people to train as engineers and to continue to support what we're doing, not only at Drax Power, but right across the north. Energy is a huge core competency for the north. If you look at the west coast and east coast for offshore wind, On the West Coast, you also have nuclear. We're into biomass. The North has the resources and the people to deliver energy. Actually, for most of the UK, we are a net exporter of energy into the UK. But in order to continue to deliver that, we need the people and we need the skills and the expertise to deliver that. And so what is critical is that as our young people come through university or through apprenticeships, they actually want to stay in the North. And I think we've heard the way that they'll do that is if they can move between cities comfortably, they have Wi-Fi, it's punctual, and they can move quickly as well. And I think for the North particularly, it's absolutely right that there is a just transition. So as we move away from a fossil fuel economy, whether it's in power stations or industry, we can create a low carbon economy in the North and create the jobs that people need to transition from a fossil fuel economy into that low carbon one. So connectivity is absolutely critical. So whether it's freight, whether it's passenger traffic, I'm a huge supporter of NPR. And it's absolutely clear that rail and, well, freight and passenger traffic can coexist alongside each other and deliver a great result for the North. Thank you.
So if I could now ask each of our speakers to make their way up to the stage, we're going to be opening the Q&A session. So whilst you're making your way up and getting yourselves comfortable.
While they're doing that, if I could just say when we do have a question and answer session coming up now, Lucy, as you know, thank you. If you could just give your name and who you represent when we bring the microphone to you, that would be really helpful for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All comfortable already? No. I'm going to start with a question of my own, which actually is lifted from quite a few of my friends on Facebook from last night, because I like to speak to everybody about what I do. I work in railway, I really, really support our sector, but we've got a bit of bad public image at the moment. So the largest question, the most frequently asked question on Facebook last night to me, which I'm now going to pass on to Tim, was how are we going to fund this?
So we're absolutely looking for the government to fund this in totality, all £39 billion across the programme. There will be third-party opportunities. They'll be around station, around retail, and around, you know, when High Speed 2 comes up, interlinks with Northern Powerhouse Rail, how that growth of that commercial economy can happen as well to develop those jobs. But definitely 100% government funded.
Okay. Any questions from the floor on that specific angle? Okay, well answered, Tim. Any questions from the floor? Sir.
Thank you. Richard Bradford, Zero Carbon, Yorkshire. On 15th of November last year, Chris Grayling made a speech in Manchester talking about Transport for the North, and he said that he welcomes HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail, but he then went on to say he thinks that HS2 will pave the way for Northern Powerhouse Rail. Now, given that HS2 is scheduled to be up here in the late 2020s or early 2030s, does this not mean that are we in the queue for getting funding and support for Northern Powerhouse Rail? Thank you.
I think that naturally leads to Lorna.
Yes and no. So I think it's probably joint, because your question is really about the funding for NPR, which is not for me to answer. But I think I'll go back to what I said when I spoke, which is we are working hand in hand with NPR, because neither HS2 nor NPR will make their strategic objectives unless we do it together. So that is happening. You know, our officers work on a daily basis together to make sure that our programs and our timescales for work align, and that we don't have gaps in either NPR waiting for us or we're waiting for NPR. So I think as a process, we have put in place the best mechanisms we can to ensure that. I think with regards to NPR specific funding, I would have to leave that one to my colleague, Tim.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, let's be absolutely clear here. We got a further £37 million from the government in the last budget. That was additional to what we'd already got for our spend for this next year. So there's an absolute commitment there. In terms of the phasing of the work and the delivery of the work, we need to agree the single option within each of the corridors that we will be building. And that phasing will come with that money. We know what the global amount is, but what we've got to do now is to whittle down to have the single concept. The government are informed in terms of the spend profile to where we are at the moment. We are going to be entering into a spending review towards the back end of the year, and we call on the government in that spending review to note the next 5 years of spend and also the overall network cost. As I keep saying, it's affordable. We need to get away from the affordability bit. What we need to do is to agree what the network looks like. And members of the board, we will be working really closely with them to actually agree that over the next 12 months. So we're trying to agree a network across the north, in terms of that economy, 10th largest in Europe, in 1 year. And we will absolutely do that. We will work tirelessly to do that. We can then put in the spending in terms of when we're calling for it and how that comes through. I agree. We're on the naughty step in rail. 25 years I've been in this industry. I've seen the good, the bad, and the real ugly. Our programme, we're on programme. We're slightly below budget. I'm the guy in charge for NPR, and I'm on the line. And I take that responsibility extremely seriously. I have to deliver for my board and my board members across the north, and also for 15 million people. So I want to do that, and I want to work with all of you so we achieve that goal. But we absolutely need high speed 2. No high speed 2, we're in trouble. So we work seamlessly together.
Okay, Steve, would you like to add any comment to that?
Yeah, and that is that we seem to be in the mindset that the current government is always going to be the government. Well, I don't accept that. I mean, they might not be the same government in a few weeks' time. And if there was to be a change of government, that might mean a change of emphasis. And if there is a change of emphasis, that means that we might get NPR quicker than that's being currently scheduled. The thing that we have to do as a country is to understand that infrastructure is not just about funding. And look, as a country, we cannot not do this. We have to do this because we have to rebalance the economy. But if the magic wand comes out and we had the money tomorrow, we haven't got the skills base to deliver this. And that's why it needs a long lead-in period. It needs governments to be working with the likes of combined authorities, devolved areas, and councils across the north through NPR, through TfN, through TfN, to ensure that the sequencing and phasing of any project is able to be delivered. So we stand by those areas that do want to use their devolved powers to ensure that the skill base is ready and willing. We stand by to work with the government, but it needs a commitment from government, and that's why I was saying I think the hurdle that we've just overcome is an important one, but it's not the end goal. We need the government to actually commit to a start date.
I think I just really want to embellish that, if you mind indulging me. So in the next 15 years, we'll lose half the workforce in the railway because they'll be retiring. They'll be finishing, they'll be moving on.
Not if Jacob Rees-Mogg's the Prime Minister.
And my biggest risk, actually in my mind, is not the money. It's about the skills. It's about the 20,000 people that we'll need to build Northern Powerhouse Rail. But don't forget, at the same time, High Speed 2 Phase 2B in the north will also be being built. And also you'll have Network Rail in terms of what they're doing with maintenance, works, renewal works. So that's why Transport for the North called for us being the guiding mind, to pull the main programmes together and to look to co-client those, as we have done with Northern Powerhouse Rail. And you might say, what's co-clienting? Well, co-clienting is, I have an opposite number in the Department of Transport. We work closely together to develop this programme of work. But it's all very open. It's all very collaborative. And that is how we've got to this stage at the moment. You've got to be in that frame of mind. If you're not, we're just not going to get there.
Okay, well, I'd like to pull a couple of things out there. We keep referring to the short and the longer term future, and Rees-Mogg perhaps being MP, PM one day. But what we've also seen is Gracie, little Gracie, is going to be our Prime Minister one day if she gets her own way. How important is Northern Powerhouse Rail and interconnectivity between Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2 and all modes of transport? How important is that for our future generations? Who would like to start? Because I imagine you all have strong thoughts on this. I'll pick on Tim first, he's closest.
I think the main thing with transport is it's got to be seamless. So as Steve was saying there, out of his house, down to his local railway station, straight into Lime Street, straight onto an NPR network train, seamlessly getting to his destination. He's got a seat, he's got his Wi-Fi, and everybody else is sat as well. And then he can do his business and get back in a timely fashion. And that's how we need that integration piece. But the other piece of integration is, how much is this all going to cost me? And that's where one of our other programs, the smart ticketing work that's being rolled out now. It's about giving you the most competitive journey cost on a number of modes of transport. So you can seamlessly know you will get there, you will be charged the most competitive rate. And that's where we need to get to. We don't really want to be thinking about it. We have extremely busy lives. And so we just want to jump on that piece of public transport and off we go. If we want to stay in our cars, and we know what that's all about in terms of the emissions, in terms of, you know, when we're in the cities, we are struggling to breathe. And that's where that electrification piece or that hydrogen piece for those trains will really start to exude. Why aren't you getting on your train? Why are you just using the car?
Anybody else care comment, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to recognise that transport in the future, or the way that people work as well, is going to be very different. So I think people won't necessarily be commuting 5 days a week. So when they do commute, or maybe when they do go into the office, they want it to be quick, they want it to be efficient, they want to be Wi-Fi enabled all the way there, not breaking a signal just as they get outside Leeds station, the signal suddenly disappears. I mean, that's going to be really important. And also people will choose where to live based on what they can do in their spare time as well. So easy access to green areas, to recreation. So I think what we have to do with Northern Powerhouse Rail is create that environment where people say, you know what, I actually want to live and work in the north. The quality of life is here. It's a fantastic place to be, but we have to give people that access. And one of the things we saw through the Northern Powerhouse Partnership is a lot of people, there's a net emigration. People come here to do their degrees, and then they're sucked back to London to take their jobs, whether it's their first job or a second generation job. What we want to do is create an environment where people are going to stay here. We heard about the dearth of skills coming in the rail industry and the loss of experience. I see that in engineering. We need to create those jobs, and I think we are, but we also need to ensure those jobs stay in the north as well, and we have the skills we need here.
Steve?
Of course, we've got the uncertainty of a post-Brexit Britain. For us in the Liverpool City region, we're a western-facing port with historic transatlantic trade with the New World. And I have to look at what the potential opportunities are rather than to try and rerun a referendum. I wish we could. I'm a Remainer and think that this is an absolutely disastrous decision for the country. You might disagree. That's fine. I have to look at now that is a likelihood, even with the dangers of a no-deal Brexit. What might we be able to do? Well, as a country, we need to connect up the Port of Liverpool with Hull so that we can get goods and services quickly transferred from either port across. So that's going to become essential to us, and we can't continue to look at London, which is overheating, or the southeast ports, and have goods going in there and coming north back up to us. There's a better way of doing things, and that means that we have to work with the government. Connectivity will encourage economic growth. Our FDI is suffering badly at the moment for a whole host of different reasons. But I genuinely believe if we can join up all the disparate bits that we have of the north, not just in rail, but in the other areas of transport that were spoken about, we make it more likely that at least we can, if there's a level playing field, that we can win
a fight against other areas down south.
Lorna?
Yeah, and I guess just picking up on Steve's point there about sort of access to new markets as well, I think what the government's investment in both NPR and HS2 really do is globally they put this country on the map to say, you know what, we are prepared to commit to leading infrastructure. And we really shouldn't miss the opportunity globally for us to export that, to export the skills that we learn throughout the delivery period of HS2. You know, high-speed rail is happening globally all over the world. We get requests from Texas and Sweden and all sorts of different places already with regards to how to go about this and the pros and cons. And that is really, really important. And it's back to the fact that what we're actually bringing with these programs is accessibility to markets, whether they're regional, national, or global, accessibility to jobs and broader skill sets, but also accessibility to more sort of funding and investment, particularly for our SMEs.
A question from me, and I will go to the floor again in a moment. I'll get you next, Madam. On the skills agenda, bearing in mind we have the High Speed Rail College, we have the Widnes facility, we have the amazing Rail Academy up in Newcastle, we have a plethora of UTCs, we have, I think it's 3 of the 8 universities specialising in rail that lead in the Ukraine. How do you think we can use Transport for the North and Northern Powerhouse Rail to attract people into not just rail, but the wider infrastructure and multimodal markets?
Do you want NPR first?
Yeah, so we're already starting to carry out that engagement because we absolutely realise the skill set. And, you know, youngsters like my son, I mean, he's just going to be finishing off his A-levels, and it's more, I want to go to work for Google, I want to go to work for Microsoft, because the railway industry is not sexy.
Yeah, how do we make that point?
Now, the bottom line is, the rail industry is going to be really sexy. If High Speed 2 train was running today, it would be the fastest train in the world. The fastest train in the world. We need all those digital skills, those software designers, to actually make sure that that train delivers on the promise that we've set ourselves. How is the technology going to work when the trains start talking to the next trains? What about my NPR trains? How will they talk to the High Speed 2 trains? Because I'm going to have High Speed 2 trains, classic compatibles, on my network. They're going to be delivering some of my NPR services. That's why I need High Speed 2. It's that seamless integration. But I will need, right the way across the piece, I will need a lot of mechanical machinery. I have a target to actually get this whole network in by the late 2030s. Can you imagine what that means? I'll give you an idea. TransPennine upgrade is 2.9 billion to be spent over 5 years. I'll be spending 2.5 billion at a peak in 1 year. In just 1 year. So what does that mean? It means jobs. It means that legacy. It means working with those universities and those other educational establishments. I'm really driving this hard. I'm telling the contractors, boom and bust in the railway, in NPR, is over. Absolutely over. We're all hard-nosed to the grindstone every day of the week for the next 20 years. We have to deliver this. It's the rebalance in the UK economy. It's making the North and putting the North exactly where it should be. And that's where this building is, and this building reflects what we had in the North, and we will be getting that back again.
Steve?
First thing is we need to get away from the government silos, so DFT, Department for Education, BAYS, etc., need to start talking to each other and working with each other, because for far too long a transport project is just a transport project, and it's obviously not. It connects to housing and to employment and to skills and to environment and to everything else. So we've got to get away from that and start breaking it down. But something needs to happen with DFE, to tell you the truth. It needs shaking up. We're sleepwalking into a skills disaster. If anybody's seen the latest apprenticeship numbers that we've got in this country, they're going backwards because of the introduction of the apprenticeship levy. Now, the apprenticeship levy, I think, is something that most people support. It's its introduction and the way it's being introduced that's causing the problems. So nationally, 75% of where we were last year. In my city region, we're only on 66% of starts to where we were last year. In other words, a third of people who previously would have been getting an apprenticeship are not, because of the way in which the government have gone about this. They need to work with people so that we can get the skills that we'll need. You can't just turn the tap on and expect that it'll get enough people for the rail system. Oh, and we're going to build all these millions of houses, are we? Oh, and for that, and hospitals and roads, etc., etc. It needs a long-term strategic plan. The only way you can do that is working with areas that have got local industrial strategies, and that's what we're doing in our area.
Okay. Andy?
I think, Steve made a good point about it's going to take us time to build those skills up. And I think there's also a case around reskilling people that we already have. So people in the 40s, 50s, I mentioned coming out of, say, things like fossil fuel industries. We've got some really high quality engineers, very highly skilled people. Why not retrain them? So as we bring through the next wave of younger people, younger engineers, we have a ready cohort of people in their 40s and 50s ready to take those jobs.
Thank you.
I guess I think it's been fairly well publicised that Mark Thurston, our chief exec, was indeed an apprentice himself and has worked all the way up. And his commitment to apprenticeships could not be stronger. Mm-hmm. We have a strategy with regards to skill and apprentices in HS2, but I think what we can really add is it is that positivity in the market to say, you know what, if you actually go and do a course on this, you've got a pretty good chance of getting a job at the end of it. Yeah. I have to say, from a personal perspective, I'm an architect, and when I had my interview at university, they said, why on earth do you want to do this? There are no jobs. It's boom and bust. And you know what? They were largely right, actually, in construction for a long time. Mm-hmm. This is a very different message. And we are going out to schools, and we are going out to primary schools to actually get the children, the younger children, to understand that this is actually coming and the opportunity is there. HS2, at its peak, will probably need 30,000 staff to deliver within construction, and absolutely they are just simply not there at the moment. So we have a bit of time, to Steve's point, and the high-speed college is absolutely central to what we're doing with that investment. And you know, Clay Mowbray, the chief exec, is doing a fabulous job going out to the regions and say, look guys, you've got a real opportunity here. And we really can't broadcast that enough, because this is a fantastic turn of event, really, that we can go into industry and say, it's there to go for, guys, just sign up. That's very different from somebody who's come from a construction background. That was never there before. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the lady at the back who's waited ever so patiently. Okay.
I just wanted to ask a question about the relationship with the DFT. I'm Hope Valley Rail Users Group, representing Hope Valley Rail Users Group. At the moment, the much delayed capacity improvements to our line are being delayed at the DFT. If you look at the DFT pipeline document, there doesn't seem to be much mention about decisions being devolved. And I just wonder if that's not going to happen in the future, whether the decisions will actually be made in the north about important things like this.
Sure. Who wants to lead on a devolution-based question, Steve?
Oh, I thought we were going to take a few. I think the only way in which you can tackle any of those issues, given that we've just been talking about, in the other room, about Whitehall and Westminster mandarins whose families live within the M25 corridor, and they do, and you see everything through the prism of what's in the best interest of the South and South East. And I spent 7 years as a Member of Parliament, and believe me, that Westminster bubble, it really does exist. You need to break that. You need to be able to prick that bubble. And then the only way you're going to do that is by using devolution. So DFT have got to stop with this command and control perspective that they know best for us. They don't. That's why I'm such a big fan of TfN in regard to its concept. We've yet to actually prove our worth, because we'll see that when the government are signing the cheque for me. That's the real proof of the pudding. But I'm absolutely with people who fight their own corner, because you know best what's for your area, just the same as I know what's best for our area. It's there needs to be devolution of thought in Westminster. That's what needs to happen.
Thanks, Lucy. Just building on that point, Steve, I'm Laurie Quinn, I'm from SNC Lavalin. We talked about the resources that are needed to deliver this, but we've also need time, and it was mentioned in the earlier session. I wonder if people from the panel could say something about the hybrid bill process, because I understand that there will be a need for hybrid bills here. Will it be one bill? Will it be a number of bills, or will it be incremental? Will there be some things that can be built without hybrid bill? And Steve will know, 7 years in Parliament, it's the bane of anybody's life getting a tap on the shoulder from the Whip's office to say you want to go in on a hybrid bill. It's actually seen as a punishment. Is that not right, Steve?
Yeah. They are the most tedious things you can ever be part of, but ultimately so important, aren't they? Because if you get it wrong, then you'd end up with something which I'd say is the Bus Services Act 2017, and the hidden consequences of that. It needs to be much more simplistic to give us a chance of actually delivering these things in a realistic timescale. But you're right, Parliament is not there really to help areas like us. It's to centralise the powers that exist currently. But I'll let other people talk about the different process that we'll need to go through with the bills themselves. I believe it should be one, by the way.
So there's a really clear roadmap here. So the east of the north, the work that we're planning there is on existing infrastructure and major interventions. On the west of the north, so that's Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds, that is where we will require the hybrid bills. They will be the new lines. And we absolutely have to be in as soon as High Speed 2, Phase 2B comes out at the other end. We don't want this project called Crossrail 2 coming in before us. So we absolutely have to speak with one voice, and we need to be aligned and ready to go. That's why we are working closely with High Speed 2, with the expertise they have in there in terms of hybrid bill preparation, and also with the department. It's a very strong relationship that will help us deliver the programs that we need to. But we're not rolling over here. We're very clear in the north, and we're damn bullish as well. We need this, we want this, and we will get this.
Thank you. The gentleman in the pink shirt.
Yeah, Andy Bounds from the Financial Times. Pink shirt, you see, goes with the FT. Tim, you said you'd put your hand in your pocket, £50 for the next 30 years. We know that Crossrail 1 was part funded by business rates. Is there any Crossrail 2 will presumably go to the government saying we're going to pay some of this for you? So how is the North going to compete against that? And I'd particularly like to ask Andy as a businessman as well, whether the business community would be prepared to pay part of the cost in their business rates.
So I think we've been really clear. We're asking for the government to actually pay for Northern Powerhouse Rail. We've had underinvestment in the North for the last 4 decades. We can't afford it in the North. We're not at that level. We're not at the level of producing that economic value per person. So per person, we're 25% under the average. And that's why with Northern Powerhouse Rail, tied in with High Speed 2, it's all about moving that economy on to actually reach that transformational position. There will be third-party opportunities, but we at the moment absolutely call on the government. And it's affordable.
Okay, this gentleman down the front here.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. I'm the leader of York City of York Council and also Vice Chair of Transport for the North. But wearing one of my other hats, I'm also Chair of the East Coast Main Line Authority. And I've heard nothing about the East Coast Main Line and indeed the West Coast Main Line. How can I assure my members that what's been said today is going to not lead to a lack of investment in the 2 main arteries going up the West Coast and the East Coast between the South and Scotland that passes through the North?
Who would like to take that?
Do you want to start strategically? Do you want to
Yeah, okay. So, Ian, we have absolutely been working with East Coast and West Coast Mainline teams, with ECMA. We've already had our first workshop. And what this is about is to give us a seamless transport system across the North. We already know about the investment going in the East Coast Mainline in terms of the power upgrade work, in terms of Transpennine upgrade tying in. And that's why we call for that more coordinated co-clienting position. So we actually look at transport holistically across the North. East Coast Main Line, West Coast Main Line, they are golden assets. High Speed 2 will allow more frequency in terms of using West Coast and East Coast Main Line because we're giving further capacity. It's a release of capacity for freight, it's a release of capacity for passenger trains as well. So we're absolutely baking that into our strategy, and I think it's really clear in terms of our strategic transport plan just how we're looking to do that.
Thank you.
Tony Latienda from Andrew Eden Partners. I think a couple of points I'd like to make. As an SME, we find it incredibly difficult to bring innovation into what you're trying to bring into making a difference to all the economic benefits. We find it incredibly difficult. There is no clear route map in bringing innovation and also transferring skills and knowledge from the fact that we work with 6 out of the top 10 global technology providers. We've spoken about Microsoft, we've spoken about Google. We work with them, but we find it incredibly difficult to break down those barriers. So I'd like to get some thoughts and ideas from the panel, please.
Well, I'd actually like to interject a little bit. I'm representing SME. In a previous life, I worked for a trade association, the rail industry, and there's another trade association represented in the room. You have governmental representatives here as well. I agree and I share your pain. It isn't easy, it isn't quick to break new into the railway sector. We can have a chat afterwards, but there are certain ways in which people are being encouraged. There are certain ways in which the railway supply chain has its barriers. I'm not disagreeing with you, sir. There are obstacles we do need to get over, and therefore I would actually like to hand over to Lorna to see how HS2 are tackling this.
Yeah, so we actually have a Director of Innovation, Ian Roche, who has absolutely worked directly with the supply chain and our PSCs, our sort of professional consultants as well, to ensure that we can try and maximise the opportunity of that. So I think HS2 definitely recognise that we have to make sure we don't miss any opportunity, because by 2033 all we'll get is, well, why on earth didn't you do this? Because it was obvious that this is, going to be a requirement by that point. So as an organisation, I think we are committed to it. I'm happy to take offline and to sort of make sure that we can connect you to the right people. Whether that's visible in the market or not now, I think that's probably a fair challenge, that we maybe aren't doing as much as we could in that respect. But again, it's actually people like the individuals within this room that can help us do that. So happy to pick up afterwards.
I'd like to add as well, and it picks up on the comment that you made about the departments needing to speak to one another as well. None of us have mentioned the Rail Supply Group. I don't know if anybody's aware of the Rail Supply Group, but that is 3 government departments coming together to drive the railway supply chain, and one of its driving aims is to encourage and enable innovation. And I see you rolling your eyes, sir. Why don't we use days such as today to force those conversations further and to help enact them? Next question, sir.
My name's Adrian Swift. I'm from Merseyside Civic Society. I'd like to change the tone of the discussion slightly. We haven't discussed in this meeting the implications for land use planning. Now, the 2 projects that have been discussed and mentioned here today, NPR and HS2, will work because they are going to go to either very strong hubs or city centres. Now, I think one of the things that needs to be done fairly rapidly is some strategic thinking about what it means for the places where these facilities, the new facilities, will arrive at. And it might, if you're going to maximize the economic potential, it might mean there will have to be some very strong interventions in and around those hubs. And I'm talking about land assembly, preparation of land for economic development, and so on. And at the same time, there needs to be complementary, very strong local transport networks. And I stress the word networks because on Merseyside, I live within walking distance of a Merseyrail station. But the problem with Merseyrail is that it's a self-contained network. And if Steve had gone the other way from Aintree, north eastwards, he would hit the buffers in Ormskirk, literally on what used to be a main line out of Liverpool. Now, that whole issue of land use planning, connectivity, employment development needs to be much more strongly emphasised.
Thank you.
Shall I pick that up?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm charged by 2020 that I have to have a spatial development strategy, so a framework for doing all of that. And you mentioned the difference quite rightly again about intercity and intracity. I want to extend what we currently do on our intracity service, but also previously I mentioned about the bus services bill. We need an integrated transport system. You can't just rely on rail, and we can't just rely on buses, and we need to build in active, Dan Jarvis was just talking in the big room about active transport. So we need cycling, we need walking, we need to pull all that together. That's the beauty of devolution. We're starting to develop that. This year we'll have a mayoral transport plan that will pull all of those disparate strands together. But you're right, without thinking ahead about what we need to do strategically at a sort of a real macro level, then we can't do the bits that we want to do, which is to join our transport systems much more coherently, so that, for instance, if I'm on a bus, I don't turn up, as I can do at the moment, to a Merseyrail train station 2 minutes after the train's left. I want to reverse that, but it's a little bit more complicated than what I want. I have to do things in regard to legislation, unfortunately.
Okay, I have to call time. I think a closing comment from Tim.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, strategic transport plan, definitely worth a read. Brings a lot of these things together in terms of North. We've thought about that 30-year plan with our partners. In terms of innovation, absolutely. I'm tired as well. We need to bring that innovation on. High Speed 2 have called for 60% SMEs in terms of delivery. Well, I like a bit of a competition, so I'd like more than that in terms of SMEs being able to deliver this. And you've got to have the avenues to have that conversation. My door is always open. My phone is always on. And I like to talk about what we can really do, what the art of the possible is, and to have, finally, a world-class railway in the north of England.
I can actually vouch for that. He does always answer questions. Okay, I'd like to thank you all. I just want to point out the fact that you do have an abridged version of the Strategic Transport Plan in your day packs. If you haven't yet accessed it, download the full plan. It's on TfN's website. You can access it through the pinned tweet as well. If you do have any more questions, I personally would encourage you to ask them with the hashtag #OneNorth, and we'll get TfN responding to you. I'd also like to remind you that as this breakout session closes, we do have the Vice Chairs of Transport for North, Councillor Ian Gillies, hosting a Q&A with Lucy Hudson, who is TfN's lead freight officer, and Tim Foster, who is TfN's head of economic advice. So that is the next breakout session. Thank you all very much.